Good morning/afternoon/evening, everyone. Let's begin with a simple idea that hides a profound truth. What we hear and how we move through space can fundamentally shape how well we learn. Today, I want to talk about two often overlooked systems in the body, hearing and balance, and how they play a direct biological role in boosting focus and learning capacity. Let's begin with what's happening deep inside our ears, not just what we hear, but how our bodies know where they are in space. Inside the inner ear, there are two remarkable systems working side by side. One is the cochlea, a fluid-filled structure shaped like a snail shell, which translates sound waves into electrical signals that the brain can understand. The other is the vestibular system, which is responsible for balance, spatial orientation, and movement detection. What's fascinating is that both of these systems live in the same place and share neural pathways that lead directly into the brainstem and areas responsible for regulating attention, posture, and alertness. This means that hearing and balance aren't just sensory add-ons. They're foundational to how we engage with the world, moment by moment. For example, when the vestibular system senses that you're upright and stable, it sends signals that help regulate your level of cortical arousal, essentially your brain's readiness to pay attention. At the same time, the cochlea is feeding your brain a rich stream of auditory information, which the brain uses to orient itself in time and space. Together, these systems form a real-time internal GPS that doesn't just help you stand or hear. It helps you focus, process, and learn. Disruptions in either system, like inner ear infections, poor balance control, or even mild hearing loss, can lead to problems with attention and cognitive engagement. We see this in young children who struggle with learning because their balance system hasn't fully developed, or in older adults who experience cognitive decline linked to hearing loss. But the key takeaway is this: the inner ear is not just about sound and balance. It's a command center for brain activation. And when these systems are working well, they prepare the brain to absorb information more effectively, stay alert longer, and maintain focus without fatigue. Now let's consider the role of sound, not just as something we hear, but as something that can directly shift our brain into a heightened state of focus. When we're exposed to specific types of auditory input, particularly rhythmic or patterned sounds, we activate a network deep in the brainstem known as the reticular activating system. This system is crucial for regulating wakefulness and alertness. In other words, certain sounds don't just register in the ear. They flip a biological switch that tells the brain, "Pay attention, something important is happening." This kind of arousal isn't the jittery, overstimulated type we associate with distractions or noise pollution. It's a focused arousal, a calm, alert state where the brain is ready to receive and process information. Think of it like adjusting a lens into sharper focus. The right kind of auditory environment can help the brain tune out irrelevant stimuli and lock onto what matters, whether it's a math problem, a language concept, or the task of reading a complex text. Interestingly, studies have shown that low-level background noise, like soft white noise, nature sounds, or even subtle instrumental music, can improve concentration, especially in people who are prone to distraction. This effect is most pronounced in environments where silence becomes too empty, allowing the mind to wander. In these cases, controlled auditory stimulation acts as a stabilizer, anchoring attention. It's not just about masking distractions, it's about guiding the brain into a neurochemical state that supports learning. This mechanism also explains why certain environments, like a humming library or a softly buzzing coffee shop, can feel more conducive to study than complete silence. The auditory signals present in those spaces stimulate parts of the brain that keep us alert and engaged. Conversely, when auditory input is too chaotic, sharp, erratic, or unpredictable, it disrupts this system and leads to cognitive fatigue. So the quality and rhythm of what we hear matters immensely. In practical terms, this means we can use sound intentionally to improve focus. Whether it's through curated soundscapes, ambient music, or tools like noise, canceling headphones that filter for optimal frequencies, sound becomes a lever we can pull to influence mental performance. It's not about volume, it's about structure and predictability, and when used strategically, sound becomes not just something we hear, but something that activates learning from the inside out. Now let's shift from what we hear to how we hold ourselves, because the way we physically move and maintain our posture is deeply tied to how we think, focus, and learn. This link begins with the vestibular system, that same inner ear structure responsible for detecting motion and balance. Every time we tilt our head, stand upright, or even shift weight from one foot to the other, the vestibular system sends a flood of information to the brain about where the body is in space. But here's what's most striking. These signals don't just help us stand, they prime the brain for cognitive engagement. Think about what happens when someone is slouched, hunched forward, or physically unstable. The brain devotes more resources to simply keeping the body upright and balanced. That effort pulls attention away from higher cognitive functions, like processing language, solving problems, or retaining information. On the other hand, when we're well, balanced, upright, and physically aligned, the brain operates with more efficiency and clarity. Energy isn't being wasted on staying steady. It's redirected toward learning and focus. Posture also affects breathing. When we're upright and balanced, we breathe more efficiently, which means more oxygen delivery to the brain. Better oxygenation improves not just alertness, but executive functions like working memory, task switching, and decision making. That's why physical posture isn't just a body issue, it's a cognitive one. The vestibular system quietly governs these adjustments, creating a foundation on which learning can happen more easily and more sustainably. This connection is especially critical in developing brains. In children, for example, underdeveloped or dysregulated vestibular systems can lead to challenges with attention and impulse control. Kids who have trouble sitting still or focusing in class are often compensating for a lack of internal stability. Essentially, their brains are too busy trying to maintain balance to fully engage in the learning task. The same is true, though often less visible, in adults who feel mentally foggy or easily fatigued in environments that require sustained attention. The root cause isn't always mental, it's sometimes sensoromotor. The good news is that the vestibular system can be trained. Small, deliberate movements like balancing exercises, head rotations, or even simply standing up and changing posture throughout the day can re-engage the balance centers in the brain. These actions send a neurological signal: wake up, orient, pay attention. By physically aligning ourselves, we create a neurological state that's more receptive to new information and less prone to distraction. So the next time you feel mentally tired or unfocused, it might not be a lack of willpower or interest. It might be your brain signaling that the body's foundational systems need to reset. A shift in balance, a change in posture, a few seconds of movement, these are simple but powerful ways to re-engage the brain for learning. As we explore further, it becomes clear that the connection between hearing and learning isn't just about the ear detecting sound, it's about how the brain uses sound to organize attention. When sound enters the ear, it's processed by the cochlea and sent to the auditory cortex, but that's just the beginning. From there, it's distributed to a network of brain areas that are deeply involved in focus, decision making, and working memory. In particular, the auditory system is tightly linked to the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for executive function, and also to areas like the parietal lobe that help direct spatial attention. This networked interaction means that sound doesn't just register as a background experience. It influences what we pay attention to, how long we can hold that attention, and how effectively we can switch between tasks. In fact, one of the brain's key attentional systems, known as the frontoparietal network, becomes more active when we process meaningful or structured sounds. That's why sudden or intentional sounds, like someone calling your name or a change in pitch, can instantly redirect your focus. Your brain is wired to prioritize auditory signals and respond to them faster than even visual ones. But it's not just about reflex, it's about regulation. The precision with which we process auditory input shapes the clarity of our attention. Individuals who have strong auditory discrimination skills, who can detect subtle differences in tone, pitch, or rhythm, tend to show stronger working memory performance and better learning outcomes. This is true in everything from language acquisition to math and problem solving. It's not that hearing makes someone smarter. It's that refined hearing enhances the brain's ability to allocate attention, which is the gatekeeper of all learning. On the flip side, when auditory processing is impaired, through hearing loss, auditory processing disorder, or even prolonged exposure to disorganized noise, the attentional system suffers. The brain has to work harder to filter and interpret sound, leading to cognitive fatigue, increased distractibility, and slower learning. This overload not only strains mental resources, but can lead to long-term changes in how the brain prioritizes information, often reducing the efficiency of attentional control over time. The implications here are powerful. It means that by sharpening how we listen, we can also improve how we focus. Listening becomes a form of cognitive training. Activities like active listening, sound-based memory games, or even musical training don't just develop auditory skills. They strengthen the neural circuits that govern attention. It's a bidirectional relationship. Attention helps us hear better, and hearing helps us pay better attention. In practical terms, this also reminds us that the auditory environment matters. Clear, well-structured sound input, free from excessive clutter or chaos, helps the brain remain calm yet alert. It invites engagement rather than forcing the brain into a defensive, filtering mode. And when the brain isn't defending itself from distraction, it's free to do what it does best, learn. One of the most overlooked keys to enhancing learning is something so fundamental, so ingrained in our biology, that we often miss its importance entirely: movement. More specifically, the way our bodies move through space-activating muscles, shifting posture, and changing orientation feeds directly into the same neural systems that govern attention and learning. And at the heart of this relationship is the vestibular system. When we move, whether we're walking, nodding, stretching, or even balancing on one leg, the vestibular system is constantly sending real-time updates to the brain. These signals don't just help us keep our balance or coordinate motion. They stimulate areas of the brain responsible for neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself and form new connections. This means that physical movement isn't separate from learning. It actually primes the brain to learn. Movement activates alertness, increases blood flow, elevates mood, enhancing neurotransmitters like dopamine, and prepares the brain to encode new information. This link has been clearly demonstrated in both children and adults. In classroom settings, students who are given brief movement breaks or who engage in light physical activity before a learning task consistently show improved concentration, memory retention, and task accuracy. And it's not just about exercise in the traditional sense. Simple head rotations, balance exercises, or even slow intentional walking stimulate the vestibular system in ways that elevate the brain's readiness to process information. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. Our brains didn't evolve to learn while sitting still for hours. We evolved to learn in motion while exploring, scanning environments, and interacting with the physical world. Movement is how the brain first learned to predict outcomes, adapt to challenges, and build patterns. When we move, we engage sensory, motor, and cognitive systems simultaneously. The result is a brain that's more synchronized, more awake, and more capable of absorbing new knowledge. Even more intriguing is the role of vestibular stimulation in emotional regulation. Movement patterns that stimulate balance systems, such as swaying, spinning, or shifting weight, can calm the nervous system, reducing anxiety and improving the brain's capacity for focused attention. This explains why activities like yoga, dance, and even playful spinning or swinging are so effective for mental clarity. They don't just move the body, they reset the mind, and this doesn't require hours of physical effort. Small doses, 60 to 90 seconds of head movement, posture changes, or mindful walking, are often enough to engage the vestibular system and trigger a cascade of neural readiness. These movements create what we might call neurological momentum, a short burst of physical engagement that sets the stage for sustained cognitive effort. So if you're sitting for long stretches trying to focus, studying, or working through a difficult problem, and the brain starts to fog over, the answer might not be another coffee or more willpower. It might be to move. Stand up, tilt your head, walk around the room, engage your body so your brain can fully come online. Because learning doesn't begin in the mind alone. It starts with the body's signals that it's ready. Now that we understand how deeply the auditory and vestibular systems are wired into our ability to focus and learn, the next logical question becomes, how do we work with these systems, consciously, deliberately, to enhance our mental performance? Fortunately, the tools to do this aren't complicated, expensive, or out of reach. They're accessible, grounded in biology, and surprisingly simple. The key is intentional engagement, using small, regular practices to tune these systems and, through them, the brain itself. Let's start with the auditory side. Sound, when used strategically, becomes a powerful lever for cognitive performance. The goal isn't just to eliminate noise, but to curate the sound environment to promote sustained attention. Low frequency, consistent soundscapes like white noise, brown noise, gentle rain, or soft ambient music can reduce mental drift and anchor attention. These types of sounds help suppress neural activity in areas of the brain responsible for distraction, while enhancing those involved in focused effort. You can think of them as a kind of auditory scaffolding for the brain, holding attention in place so cognition can build. Timing matters too. Using these soundscapes just before or during a task you want to focus on can set the brain into an ideal state for learning. Just as a warm-up prepares the muscles before exercise, auditory priming prepares the brain before mental effort. Even wearing noise, filtering headphones during deep work, can subtly influence focus, not just by blocking external sounds, but by shaping the brain's internal rhythm through predictable auditory cues. Now let's move to the vestibular side, which responds to movement, balance, and body orientation. You don't need to run a marathon or do gymnastics to activate this system. Simple, controlled movements can be remarkably effective. Standing on one foot while brushing your teeth, slowly tilting your head from side to side, rolling your eyes in a circle, or practicing slow, balanced walking with your eyes fixed on a point. All of these stimulate the balance system and increase alertness. And when these are done before learning, they can improve neural readiness. One highly effective protocol is to engage in about 1-2 minutes of vestibular activation before sitting down to study or work. Something as basic as walking in a figure-8 pattern, doing light stretches that involve shifting weight, or even standing up and bouncing gently on your heels can have a measurable impact on how focused and alert you feel afterward. These aren't just physical tricks. They're ways of feeding the brain the exact kind of sensory input it's evolved to interpret as a cue to wake up and pay attention. Another overlooked tool is posture. Sitting upright, not rigidly, but with enough alignment to keep the spine neutral and the head balanced, sends a continuous stream of feedback through the vestibular and proprioceptive systems that reinforces attentional stability. It's a quiet signal, but over time, it has powerful effects on how engaged the brain stays during tasks that require sustained concentration. When these auditory and vestibular strategies are paired together, their effects are often multiplicative. A 2-minute balance warm-up followed by a consistent soundscape can help create a neurophysiological state that's not only optimized for focus, but more resilient to distractions, more emotionally regulated, and more efficient at encoding new information. These tools are available to all of us. They don't require technology or talent, just awareness and consistency, and the more we use them, the more responsive our brain becomes. Learning doesn't have to be left to chance or discipline alone. By understanding how the body speaks to the brain through sound, movement, balance, and posture, we can shape our mental state from the outside in, not just for better focus in the moment, but for deeper, more lasting learning over time. So when we talk about focus and learning, we can no longer treat the brain as if it's floating in isolation, cut off from the body, divorced from the senses. The reality is that learning is a full body experience, deeply regulated by what we hear, how we move, and the signals we send through the seemingly simple acts of standing upright or listening carefully. The inner ear, this small, quiet structure tucked deep in the scullies, not just about detecting sound or keeping us balanced. It's a biological control center, feeding the brain real-time data that determines how awake, how alert, and how capable we are of absorbing the world. What this means is profound. Focus is not a mental trick. It's a physical state. It's something we can shape through sound, through movement, through deliberate engagement of systems we often take for granted. These are not hacks. They're not shortcuts. They're part of the original design, mechanisms evolved over millions of years that, when activated intentionally, unlock deeper clarity, sharper attention, and more durable learning. So the invitation is simple. Begin to notice. Notice the posture you take when trying to learn. Notice the sounds that help you settle into concentration. Move before you sit. Listen with intention. And in doing so, you'll begin to harness the full capacity of your nervous system, not just to function, but to thrive in a state of sustained focus, curiosity, and growth. That's not just neuroscience, it's practical, embodied intelligence. And it's available to you every single day.